PC, it's the ever-evolving platform that plays host to the latest and indeed the greatest technological innovations in the gaming space. It's actually a privilege to be able to cover that here at Digital Foundry, but proper fundamental change when it comes to PC gaming takes time, and sometimes it needs a push. Case in point, the Steam Hardware Survey gives us a peek into what actual hardware is being used by gamers, and it throws up what is to me a rather disappointing statistic. Based on recent data, over 60% of displays used for gaming still just 1080p. It's time to move on, and in this video, brought to you by Digital Foundry and ViewSonic, we're going to be explaining why. But in actual fact, the explanation is really very straightforward. Most PC gaming takes place on the desktop, and in my opinion, the 27-inch 1440p display offers the best combination of size, pixel density and features. Let's talk pixel counts first. 1440p, 2560 by 1440. It's essentially an extra 33% of resolution on both horizontal and vertical axes. 3.68 million pixels in all versus 2.1 million with 1080p. Essentially a 78% increase in overall resolution. So yeah, if you're upgrading from a 24-inch 1080p screen, if my maths are correct, not only do you get more physical real estate from your new display, you're also getting a boost to pixel density as well. So this is the screen that ViewSonic sent me to look at. It's their new Elite XG270QC. It is 1440p, it is 27-inch, but it's also curved with a 1500R rating. Quick explanation there, 1500 is the radius of the circle the curve creates, measured in millimeters. The idea is to more subtly increase immersion by directing more of the resolution to your eyes. Here's a more detailed look at the XG270QC package. The front folds open and the first block of polystyrene reveals the accessories. What we've got here are a bunch of cables, including USB 3, DisplayPort and power cables, plus the power supply itself. Then we've got the stand here, the main support column, and separately the base. Now let's peel back the next layer of polystyrene and take a look at the main screen itself. Flipping the screen over, we start to peel away the protective plastic, and we also get to see a 100 by 100 VESA mount there. You get a very sturdy metal support column and base, but you've got options here in how you mount the display using VESA standard stands. Pull away the ports cover here and you get an idea of the inputs supported. A couple of HDMI 2.0s, DisplayPort 1.4, and then a host of USB sockets, along with analog audio and power inputs. The XG270QC comes with a solid, substantial stand, and yeah, let's take a look at those two components. The height adjustable column simply slots and clicks into place, no screws required. Those are there beneath for the VESA mount option though. Then the base itself slots into place. Now you can use a flathead screwdriver to get the job done, but as is usually the case with monitors, a tab is there to do it by hand. Plug in the power and your HDMI or DisplayPort cable, and essentially you're good to go. Now, choosing a 1440p screen, there's a ton of options out there. What we've got here is a 16:9 widescreen model, 27 inches as I said. However, ultra-wide 1440p is also an option where 34-inch screens are essentially wider versions of the 27-inch standard. Either of those options for me are the sweet spot for PC. By comparison, 1080p screens, well, to my eyes, pixels look a bit too chunky, while 4K displays are just too pixel rich in the 27-inch form factor and require ginormous GPUs to run them in gaming at native resolution. 16:9, 21:9, whichever you choose, I think it is the best choice for the desktop. Now, we talk a lot about 4K on the Digital Foundry channel, and it is an option, but personally I consider that more of a choice for a large living room display. The desktop's an entirely different kettle of fish, especially when we start talking about refresh rate support. You see, resolution comes in different flavors. We've talked about physical resolution, the pixel count, 2560 by 1440 in this case, but temporal resolution is just as important. The amount of pixels delivered in any given period of time. The Elite XG270QC is typical of the high end in the 1440p space, supporting refresh rates up to 165 Hz. meaning that effectively if your PC is powerful enough to run any given game at 165 frames per second, the monitor delivers all of that visual information. That means a new frame delivered every 6 milliseconds or thereabouts. So, a while back I covered what higher refresh rates means for gaming, but essentially the advantages versus the traditional 60Hz screen, pretty simple to articulate. You can run your games faster than 60 frames per second and your screen is fast enough to deliver every pixel rendered. The alternative being to turn VSync off and see unsightly tearing and incomplete frames. Target tracking is easier as you're getting more visual input in the same time span. LCD ghosting is reduced, and because you're running the game faster, input lag is significantly lower. Now, I measured input latency on Counter-Strike Global Offensive at 60 FPS and 144 FPS, and with the latter, input lag is effectively halved. Of course, new screens like the ViewSonic XG270QC can run DisplayPort connections faster at up to 165 Hz, a 14% improvement still further. Now, can you get faster monitors? Yes, you can, and in the past we've talked about 240 Hz screens, which on paper sounds like a huge upgrade over 144 or indeed 165. Even faster screens are coming. The improvement is quantifiable, but the further you push frequency, the lower your return, and the drawback is just too high in my opinion. 240 Hz screens are typically limited to just 1080p resolution, and although some 1440p screens are starting to emerge, they're thin on the ground. That's another reason why I prefer 1440p in its various mainstream flavors. You're getting an obvious increase in physical resolution and the vast bulk of the improvement in temporal resolution. Hertz or frames per second. You see, I'm not sure that's the best form of measurement. So consider this. It's the same data but arranged in a more logical way. Rather than count how many refreshes or frames per second, this is the persistence of each frame in milliseconds. By moving from a 60 Hz screen to 144 Hz or 165 Hz, as supported on screens like the XG270QC, you're dropping frame persistence by a massive 10 milliseconds or thereabouts. And going to a 240 Hz screen, you're only gaining another reduction of 2 milliseconds or thereabouts. Yes, those 2 milliseconds, it is a gain, it is an improvement, but with most 240 Hz screens running at 1080p, what you're losing is physical resolution. So yeah, you can see why I consider gaming 1440p screens to be the sweet spot. You're getting the vast majority of the improvements in frame persistence versus a 60 Hz screen, but you're also getting a big boost to physical resolution that the majority of 240 Hz screens out there simply can't deliver. Then there's the fact that running games flat out at 240 FPS or even 165 does up the hardware requirement of the surrounding PC significantly. We'll talk about this later, but bottom line, you're going to need a really fast CPU for starters and the graphical horsepower to back that up. Otherwise, it's mostly just simpler to render esports titles that can actually really push a super fast screen to the limit. If we look at the kind of AAA game titles we usually cover on Digital Foundry, our benchmarks show that performance varies significantly depending on what you're rendering. Even 165 Hz is far from the average performance level. This is where features like variable refresh rate technology come to the fore. The XG270QC and many other screens support this technology, which puts the GPU in control of when the screen starts a refresh, giving a smoother overall presentation with no screen tearing. The ViewSonic screen here supports FreeSync Premium Pro, which bundles up adaptive sync with low frame rate compensation and HDR support. 1440p, high refresh rate support and adaptive sync. For me, these are three essential features to be looking out for. Now, I mentioned HDR there. High dynamic range rendering is an area where consoles have a ton more support than PC, but PC is definitely catching up. Now, officially, the XG270QC supports Display HDR 400. Entry-level HDR really, but an interesting spec point is that peak brightness on the display is considerably higher than the 400 nits standard. It's actually 550 nits, not far off reaching Display HDR 600 certification. So I consider this as a way to sample HDR, but not a defining feature of this new display. But I found Pure XP to be more interesting. You see, a key problem with most LCD screens is loss of resolution in motion. It's an unavoidable artifact of every flat panel display technology out there. Pure XP is built on the accepted principle of black frame insertion. So it's essentially strobing very, very fast between the content and, well, a black frame. It's strobing so fast that the human eye struggles to tell what's going on exactly, but the end result is the perception of increased resolution in motion. Short of going out and finding a vintage 2003 Sony FW900 CRT, technology like Pure XP is the best we're going to get in terms of a genuine improvement in motion handling. So look, if you're considering an upgrade from 1080p and 1440p as your target, well, let's recap the key spec points discussed so far. Yes, I do consider either a 16:9 or a 21:9 1440p screen to offer the best balance of pixel resolution to physical real estate on the desktop. I also consider a high refresh rate as a must. 120Hz support is good, but 144 or the 165Hz standard, those are becoming more widespread now, and obviously it is a superior spec point. Beyond that, as I explained earlier, we're entering the realm of diminishing returns, essential and desirable perhaps for the most committed of esports gamers, but to consistently hit 240 FPS in game, you are going to be looking at some serious hardware, and more than that, resolution on those screens is typically 1080p. Personally, that's not for me. Third spec point I consider essential in a screen upgrade: adaptive sync support. FreeSync, G-Sync, G-Sync certified FreeSync. There are several flavors, but suffice to say it's a must, especially on demanding AAA gaming content where performance can vary pretty dramatically. This keeps things smooth and silky and tear-free. Finally, I want to talk about the display type, the panel type. You see, what I'm loving about these 1440p gaming screens these days is that we're getting all of these features that deliver genuine improvements to the gaming experience, but historically, ultra-low latency, low display lag was reserved for lower quality TN screens, where color reproduction and viewing angles weren't that great. The big break came with the arrival of Nano IPS, which delivered the same 1 millisecond grey-to-grey latency as TN, but with the enhanced image quality and viewing angles typical to IPS. The ViewSonic XG270QC has such a screen, but the 270QC I have here is based on something different, an MVA screen. The firm touts a 3 millisecond grey-to-grey latency here, which is still impressive, while the moving pixel response time is indeed rated at 1 millisecond. Generally speaking, Nano IPS is more highly regarded than VA, but VA panels have one huge advantage. Contrast ratio is higher, blacks are much blacker, and images can really pop, and this can be absolutely transformative in certain types of content. Now, there's a lot more to consider in terms of features if you want to dig deeper. Do you want USB support built into your display? Is black frame insertion important to you? What type of game modes do you want selectable from the on-screen display? With the Elite series, ViewSonic adds plenty to experiment with, and there's even RGB lighting, headphone hooks and whatnot. I want to round off here with a quick note on the kind of PC required to power a 1440p screen. Well, I put together a video taking GTX 1060 benchmarks at 1080p and seeing what kind of GPU you need to get the same level of performance at 1440p. I chose 1060 there because, again, according to the Steam hardware survey, it is the most popular GPU being used right now. Anyway, the inescapable conclusion is that AMD's RX 5600 XT and RTX 2060 from NVIDIA are the logical choices for an upgrade that encompasses the extra 78% of resolution without losing performance when upgrading from 1080p. Personally though, I'd recommend 8GB cards for future-proofing. Those ones only have 6. So with that in mind, RX 5700 and RTX 2060 Super would be my picks there. But to really put a high refresh rate display through its paces, RTX 2080 level hardware is recommended. But the faster you push graphics, remember, the better the CPU you'll need to run it. AMD's Ryzen 5 3600 is the best mainstream price versus performance champion in my opinion, but Intel's Core i5-10600K is there for the hardcore. Even faster performance is better, of course. There are more performant chips than the Core i5, but seriously, simply overclocking the 10600K does just as good a job. And with that, I think that's everything covered. And really, if you're still gaming at 1080p on PC, do consider a display upgrade. Seriously, you won't regret it. But that's all from me for now. Please do like and subscribe to support the work we do here at Digital Foundry, and ring the bell for instant notifications whenever we post new video content. But that's all from me for now. Thanks for watching.